Hello everyone, welcome back to another painting tutorial video. In this video I'm going to show you how to paint Slaneesh Daemonettes. Here is the list of colors which I will be using throughout this video. I fully assembled the miniatures and I primed them with Mechanicus Standard Grey. So the first color is going to be Rakarth Flesh. As you can see, I used an airbrush to base paint the miniatures. If you do not have an airbrush in hand, that's absolutely fine. You can apply it with a brush. 2 thin coats of base color should do the trick. I mix Agrax Eartshade with Lahmian medium, a 1 to 2 part ratio, making a wash, which then I apply it onto the miniature's skin. I give it plenty of time to dry. I then apply Agrax Earthshade Wash onto the lower section of the limbs, creating a better transition from light to dark. Once I'm happy with the skin, has better contrast, I make a mix of Druvchii Violet and Lahmian medium wash, a 1 to 3 part ratio, and I apply it onto the skin, which will gradually blend better the previous washes for the skin. Because the wash is almost like a glaze, I then apply a second layer to the darker areas to make it more vibrant, the purplish tone of the skin on the limbs. Then I switch to a small layer brush and I apply the mixture onto the eye sockets as well. Now I'm going to use Carroburg Crimson Wash and I am applying it on the recesses where the garter and also other accessories meeting with the flesh. I also apply it inside of the mouths and around the lips. I am using an extra small artificer brush for this. I am also applying it to the inside of the claws on the fleshy areas. Now I'm going back to the base color of the models, Rakar Flesh, and I do a sort of layer and highlight of the bright part of the skin. I use a small layer brush for this. For the darker transition of the flesh between the lower arms to the upper arm area and the calves to the thighs, I use Slaneesh Grey as a layer to give it more contrast to the skin where the transformation begins on the Daemonettes. Now I'm going to apply on the claws and feet Daemonette's hide as a layer. On the tips of the claws I base paint them, however I leave out the fleshy bits. I also go a little bit over to the Slaneesh Grey area to make the best transition on the skin. Now I'm going back to use Druvchii Violet Wash, and I apply it with a small layer brush onto the Daemonette hide painted areas on the claws. I am also applying it onto the feet and just a little bit over to the calf area. Make it more darker and more colorful. Once the wash is completely dry, I use again Slaneesh Grey, and I do an edge highlight on the claws and also on the feet, the most raised surfaces and areas, just the sharpest features to make them pop out more and also blend everything together nicely. Now I'm going to use Noon Oil Wash. I use a small layer brush and I apply it onto the tip of each claws. I'm going to apply at least 2 free washes just to gradually darken down all the tips of each claws. I am adding a final layer of wash of Noon Oil. This is the 4th layer actually, just at the tip to make it very dark, almost black. And finishing the skin with a mix of Rockart flesh and Pallid Witch flesh, a 1:1 part ratio. I use an extra small artificer brush and I edge highlight the sharpest features of the skin on the face and also the muscles, and giving a bit more highlight onto the chest area. I decided to use it also as a layer on the flatter surfaces, just to give brighter contrast to the skin. Now for the kinky stuff, I am using Abaddon Black as a base color. I I use a small layer brush and I start base painting all the leather details on the models, such as the garments, the choker necklace and other small bits that can be found on the miniatures. I also apply it onto the razor sharp teeth, on the claws, and also the claws on their feet and ankle. On some areas I take my time slowly, trying to be as neat as possible, especially where the bits are meeting with the already painted skin. As you can see, I left out the loincloth. I will be using a different base color to it. Now I'm going to use Eshin Grey, and with a small dry brush I start dry brushing the garters. Then I switch to a small layer brush and I edge highlight the garter and also the other small accessories on the models. I will also use as a highlight on the teeth, on the claws, and also on their feet, each of the claws. Now to tone it back a little, I apply Null wash onto the leather parts. It will help also to blend together with the skin, adding it to the recesses. I also apply it around the eyes, just to make a darker shade around the eyes, give it a sort of makeup on around their eyes. Now I'm going to use Mechanicus Standard Grey, and with a small layer brush I start edge highlighting all the leather bits. And finishing it off with an Administratum grey. I use an extra small artificer brush, and again I use edge highlighting, but mainly focusing on the sharpest features of each leather bit. And I seal the leather with some Ardcoat, which will give a shine effect to their clothes. I'll be using it only on the garters and the choker mainly. The cloth part I leave it matte to give it a more richer variation of their choice of clothing. As for their loincloths, I use Eshin grey as a base color. I use a small layer brush and I start base painting the cloth area. After that I use non-oil wash and I apply it onto the cloth area. Once the wash is completely dry, I use Mechanicus Standard Grey and I start edge highlighting the loincloth parts. Now for the metal bits I use Runefang Steel as a base color. I use a small layer brush and I start base painting all the metallic parts that can be found on the models. I leave out the flagpole, the trumpet and the champion's metallic claws. I also leave out some of the minor small pendants which I will be painting with a different color. Once I'm done base painting all the metallic parts, I use Druvchii Violet Wash and I apply it onto the metallic bits. I am going to add onto the Stormhost silver some Druvchii Violet Wash, which will make this nice purplish silver to the metal bits. I apply it as a layer, leaving the deep recesses untouched. Then I edge highlight using only Stormhost silver, just onto the sharpest corners and features of the metallic bits. Now for the eyes, I am going to use Wraith Bone as a base color. I use an extra small artificer brush and I slowly and gently, carefully, I base paint their eyes and I also base paint their teeth. Now I'm going to use Fuegan Orange Wash and I apply it onto the eyes. And finishing the eyes with Fleshgitz Yellow. Again, carefully and slowly I place a small dot into the center of each eyes. Moving on to their hair, I use Dark Reaper as a base color. I start applying it and start base painting the hair. Some of the models has these missing areas, so with an extra small artificer brush I just put some thin lines, as in the clip keeping together their hair. Once it's base painted, I use Drakenhof Nightshade Wash and I apply it onto the whole surface of the hair. It's nice and dark, however I want it a bit more darker, so I'm applying also Null Oil Wash onto the hair. I edge highlight the hair using Storm Vermin Fur. Now for the champion's claws, the flagpole and the trumpet, I choose Hashust Copper as a base color. Once everything is base painted, I am going to use again Druvchii Violet Wash, and I start applying it onto the Hashust Copper area. Once the wash is completely dry, I am going to use Liberator Gold, and with a small dry brush I start dry brushing the golden areas. And I finish the golden details by using Stormhost Silver as a edge fine highlight. As mentioned before, I left out some small pendants uncolored, so I'm gonna use Balthasar gold as a base color for them. I am going to use Agrax Earthshade wash onto the Balthasar gold base painted areas. Now I'm going to layer an edge highlight with Retributor armor. Now I'm going to use Khorne red as a base color for the flag. I use a small base brush and I'm trying to be as neat as possible, especially around the painted areas. Now I'm going to use Druvchii Violet Wash again, and I apply it onto the Khorne red area. Once the wash is completely dry, I am going to use Emperor's Children first. With a small dry brush, I start dry brushing the flag itself. Around the areas where the claw meets with the fabric, it is far too difficult to dry brush, so I am using wet technique by watering down heavily the Emperor's Children paint, and I apply it onto the area where I couldn't really do the dry brushing. I also use it on some of the flatter parts, applying it multiple times, slowly brightening layer by layer the flag itself, giving a much smoother transition and look to the flag. Once I'm happy with the wet blending, then I'm using again Emperor's Children, and with a small layer brush I edge highlight all the edges of the flag, giving a nice crisp, bright look onto the sharpest features. And just to darken it down slightly a bit and blend it together even better, I make a mix of Lahmian medium and Druvchii violet, a 1:1 part ratio, and I give another wash onto the flag. Now I'm using Kislev flesh, and with an extra small artificer brush I do a fine edge highlight onto the sharpest features and creases onto the flag. For the Slaneesh icon, I choose Abaddon black as a base color, and I start base painting it with a small layer brush. I then add Nuln oil wash and putting it mainly into the recesses, giving a better blending with the actual flag itself. Once the wash is completely dry, I am using Eshin grey, and with a small layer brush I start layering and also edge highlighting the areas, the highlighted areas. Giving more highlight with Mechanical Standard Grey, focusing more on the raised surfaces and raised areas. and finishing it off with Dawnstone, a fine edge highlight just at the tip of each sharpest corner. And with that, the models are finished. Only basing time is left. I decided to go for a simple, elegant marble floor, as in they are marching in Slaneesh's hallway, ready to enter to the real world using the warp. Thank you so much for watching the tutorial. If you find it useful or helpful, do subscribe to the channel, do hit the like button, that would greatly help out the channel. And also, if you wish to be notified about future video tutorials, do hit the bell button. I am working really hard and trying to find more and more free time to upload more often tutorial videos. Thanks for watching. Cheers.